GTA San Andreas left us not only with incredible memories, but also many question marks. We cannot be sure what happened to certain characters, and the story itself has a few gaps that are begging to be clarified. For example, in what way was CJ responsible for the death of his younger brother? What was going on behind the scenes in terms of Caesar's gang, especially in the period after CJ was exiled from the city by Tenpenny and Pulaski? What did Torino's plan look like from his perspective? Or how did he manage to survive CJ's attack on him in the Torino's last flight mission? You know, despite CJ shooting down his chopper with a rocket, it later turned out that Mike is chilling in some ranch in the desert. Another big question mark lies in the Las Venturas thread. Cause what exactly happened to the big mafia deal after CJ and Woozie performed the successful robbery of the Caligula's casino? For which, as you probably remember, Salvatore wanted to skin CJ alive. It would seem that if Rockstar made prequels to the two much less advanced and less complex GTA parts, where there was nowhere near as much to clarify story-wise, it would be no different in the case of San Andreas. Meanwhile, months passed, then years, until the release of GTA 4 and GTA San Andreas stories could officially enter the category of unrealistic dreams. But assuming that we would get a prequel for SA, let's speculate on what its story could be about. Looking at the prequels for GTA 3 and Vice City, it's hard to figure out a pattern that would help us answer that question. Cause in GTA Liberty City Stories, we have the story of Tony Cipriani, a guy who was one of the employers for Claude. Nothing special. Therefore, it's hard to say why the developers decided to go for that character specifically, especially that there were a lot more interesting threads in GTA 3 that would constitute much better ground in the case of a prequel. How about the story of Donald Love, the story of the corrupted cop Ray Machowski, or the Yakuza thread, which would be cool to explore through the eyes of Asuka or Kenji, or maybe one of their workers who'd receive quests directly from them. So as you can see, the story concept in GTA Liberty City Stories seems to be a bit of a random pick. It's not a different case with GTA Vice City Stories too. The game portrayed the story of the guy that in GTA Vice City said a few words and died. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but the truth is that after completing GTA Vice City, it'd be rather unlikely to expect that in its future prequel, we'd get the story of Vic Vance. We'd probably go for a story of one of Tommy's partners, or that the developers would go for an unconventional solution and would show us the story of one of the antagonists of Vice City. You know, Ricardo Diaz or Lance Vance. I'm excluding Sonny Forelli because that would require the game to take place in Liberty City, which would clash with the concept. In any case, what we can say is that the story narrative that the developers decided to go for here could be quite shocking for many. So if someone's telling you that they know whose story would be portrayed in the DLC for GTA San Andreas, they're full of crap, to put it mildly. Just think how complex and multi-threaded San Andreas is, and how many options there'd be. What would be the most exciting for me personally would be events from the perspective of Mike Torino. What other things did he have to do for his agency? What did the process of forming the Loco Syndicate look like exactly? How did he meet T-Bone Mendez? And how did they get in a partnership with Tenpenny? Another interesting idea that I think would be a great fit for a DLC would be the story of very much liked by players Cesar Villalpando and his gang. Besides, the thing that I'm talking about now is the main theme of the fan-made modification that is currently under development. And in fact, the gameplay that serves as background for my today's considerations comes from the beta version of that mod. Going further, I'd also be in favor of a more unconventional approach, cause why not take one of the antagonists of GTA San Andreas and make him the main character of the edition? Taking into account all the inconsistencies to do with Ryder's character, he'd be just cut out for this role. For example, it'd be interesting to see how Ryder got manipulated by Smoke and convinced to join the dark side of the Force. You know, how Ryder gradually grew into the idea of betraying Sweet, who wasn't putting a lot of effort towards the development of his gang. In short, in my humble opinion, a story for a DLC in which we'd get Ryder as the main protagonist would be a brilliant idea. Yet another idea is a story of Jimmy Hernandez and his adventures with Crash. How he started conspiring against Tenpenny and Pulaski. That'd be amazing. Equally exciting would be the ending of such a DLC, cause as we remember, Hernandez died in San Andreas. If we manage to identify with that character, get to know his moral code and personality, and how much he wanted to expose the corruption of those two rude boys, and then once again experience the moment of his death, I'd definitely be excited for that. A quite unobvious idea would be continuing with the concept of Carl Johnson as the protagonist. Wouldn't it be cool to see the adventures of Carl in Liberty City? How did he get in contact with Joey Leone, and what was the nature of their partnership? Such a narrative could also be answering the questions concerning CJ's younger brother, Brian. Such a DLC could also revolve around the friendship of CJ and Joey. Judging by the introduction movie, the two didn't only do business together, but they were also sometimes talking about private stuff. Another concept that would be interesting for me is one that would focus on the downfall of the Grove Street families. Some of you probably remember the cut conversation between Big Bear and CJ from the Beatdown on Beat Up mission. I'ma play it for you again because some of you might be unfamiliar with it, or you may not remember it exactly, and it's quite important for what I want to tell you.
Man, Grove Street families used to be tight, man. Your little Brian got caught up, you ran off. I don't mean to dish you, man, but you did.
I know, but I'm back now.
True, homie. That's real spit. Anyways, man, Sweetie just became a hard man to be with, you know? Then we got bad blood with Seville Boulevard families, and they split from the Grove, then Tempo, hell, they went Lone Ranger too. Sweet, man, he did absolutely nothing. Next thing I knew, beat-ups, he making money. Grove Streets, they set tripping. Streets ain't no place to be, man, when every fool is trying to make a move. So I tried my first blast. See what the fuss is all about, right?
Let's say that the vision for the DLC would be to depict exactly what Big Bear is talking about. We'd get to see how Brian's death changed Sweet as a person and as a leader. Additionally, we'd find out how the families lost influence and how the crack-selling gangs rose in power. And the cherry on top would be to discover the genesis of the conflict between the family sets. What's more, the developers could go for a little wild solution and give the role of the protagonist to a member of the Ballas, for instance, in order to show the long-lasting rivalry from the other side of the fence. We'd finally get to see what it looked like from the Ballas' perspective. The developers could touch on a very harsh truth here. See, it's often the case that such a Baller member hates and fights with the family's members, but in reality, the only reason for it is that he was simply born on a different block that was controlled by a different gang. The gangsters don't often choose the side. Usually, it's a work of chance. Where am I going with this? Well, the truth is that such people often have a similar moral system, and they face similar struggles. Often, it's simply the color of a bandana that decides that such people hate each other. The developers could show us in such a case that despite the Ballas being our enemies in San Andreas, their lives also had depth to it. One could get immersed to it, understand it, or even identify with it. It would undoubtedly be an interesting experience, especially that after playing San Andreas, most of us rather didn't sympathize with the Purple Crew. And even though my list of ideas contains around 10 more points, I'll tell you about just one, so that this section of the video isn't too long. Another interesting concept would be the story from Woozy's perspective. Alright, well, maybe we wouldn't get to see too much in that case, but if we'd impersonate Guppy, for instance, and would get to experience the world of the Triad from that man's perspective, working directly for Woozy, I think that would be a good idea. We'd be able to better understand the functioning of that organization, the businesses it conducts, and perhaps get to know the mysterious Ron Fa Lee more. To summarize that point, as we can see, in terms of concepts for the story for a DLC, the options are plenty. In fact, no matter which one we get, or even if we got 2 different DLCs for San Andreas, so similarly to GTA 4, we'd still probably complain about another 2,000 threads that we'd like to be explained. The question appears, was it a good move by Rockstar to not make GTA San Andreas stories? After all, the players love GTA SA. The addition to such a well-known title would undoubtedly be a success. Even until today, many consider GTA San Andreas as the best game ever made. However, no matter how good San Andreas is, it turns out that the developers really had valid reasons to resign from creating SA stories. There are 6 main reasons that I thought of. One of them, the most obvious one, is the hardware limitations of the consoles that GTA San Andreas Stories would be released for. Looking at what consoles GTA Liberty City Stories and Vice City Stories were made for, it's safe to assume that SA Stories would mainly be targeted for PS2 and PSP. In the video about the beta content, we already mentioned that even in San Andreas, the developers moved heaven and earth to somehow be able to fit all those features, content, and the long story, so the consoles don't explode at launch. And it's worth adding that apparently the game initially was meant to be distributed on 2 separate discs, obviously due to its extensive size. I'm saying this because looking at VCS and LCS, it's clear that the developers put in a lot of effort to make those games better in technical and graphical terms than their, let's say, parents. Well, at least in my opinion, the textures of the prequels overall are better on the eye. The controls have also been improved significantly. But that more on a side note, because the controls are probably not the most resource-intensive element. The biggest issue is the graphics here. The story's games are simply better in this aspect. Better car reflections, improved lighting, smoother animations, and the world itself is more detailed. And if we compare the amount of content in GTA Vice City and Vice City Stories, then we can very clearly see that Rockstar really went an extra mile here. The prequels were not in any case a cash grab. They were 2 very well prepared titles, in many aspects significantly more advanced than GTA 3 and Vice City. So if that was the case with those 2 games, if the studio wanted to make SA Stories 2, they wouldn't want to take a step back. And how do you go forward if even the original GTA San Andreas blew everyone away, and even that game would not be possible to port to PSP? But forget PSP. If the original San Andreas was just barely adjusted for PS2, then SA Stories would be impossible to create even for that console. The developers definitely wanted to meet their ambitions, and similarly to the prequels for GTA 3 and Vice City, take a step forward in this case too. But due to the hardware limitations, the only reasonable solution would be to wait for the next generation of consoles. Otherwise, especially in the case of PSP, the project would end up looking more like a slideshow than a computer game. But even the new consoles were not good news for the potential San Andreas Stories project. The problem was that PS3 and the Xbox 360 would in turn allow for such big possibilities, that releasing SA Stories, which would still be placed in the same old 3D universe and functioning on the same engine, would be the definition of wasted potential. Hence, Rockstar had to make a game that would yet again break the system, which would be as advanced as nothing before. There was no time for compromises, and if you think about it, it's difficult to criticize Rockstar for such a decision. There were no resources, no time, and no hardware for SA Stories. All the signs on heaven and earth pointed at one and only one thing. Simply forget about the San Andreas Stories project and focus fully on preparing a fully fledged banger of a GTA game with the next generation of consoles in mind that would realize their full potential and bring the GTA series to the next level. Hence, the developers thought that it'd be best if they put everything they can into the development of GTA 4, because that game was bound to be extremely successful. And it's a good thing that they went for that option. See, as we remember, even this much time didn't turn out to be enough, which we can conclude from the PC version at the release. Besides, low frame rates occurred even on consoles, so performance-wise, GTA 4 was as bad as OG Lokes rhymes. And also, there was a 4-year break between the flag GTA games, and as for those times, it was a hell of a lot of time. I mean, I know that today, many people would kill for such a lightning fast release of the next GTA. However, back in the day, it used to be different. Year 1997, GTA 1. Year 1999, GTA 2. Then a huge revolution in GTA 3, and only 2 years of waiting. A year later, GTA Vice City, and then only 2 years of waiting for the highly advanced GTA San Andreas. Players could feel confident that even if the next title is to be absolutely revolutionary and mind-blowing, they won't have to wait for it too long. And since the release of GTA San Andreas, 1 year passed, 2 years passed, the third one began, and all we got were the 2 prequels. And even though those were fantastic games, the world remained the same, and the story was based on the one created a few years ago. Moreover, the story's games were never released for PC, which was a big issue, and a difference from the main parts of the series, which sooner or later always were given a PC release. In short, the developers had to meet the expectations that they gave the players the reasons to have up to that point, in terms of the frequency of releasing their games. But let's assume that GTA San Andreas Stories is actually released. Most likely, it'd be around 2007-2008. The game undoubtedly becomes a success. Then, releasing GTA 4 just a year after would simply not make much sense. You know how it is. After releasing such a work of art, you gotta give it some time and milk it as much as possible. Only once people begin to get bored of it is when you should release the next title. If Rockstar released a highly innovative GTA 4 just a year after GTA SA Stories, the latter would be completely outshone by the former. So what that GTA SA Stories is fantastic? The people would understandably be more excited by the game that is naturally more advanced and that realizes the full potential of the newest consoles in the shape of GTA 4. Other than that, another issue was that San Andreas Stories would not bring as much profit as one could expect. Cause, as we already said, SA Stories would be insanely more advanced than LCS and VCS, because San Andreas outclassed GTA 3 and Vice City in every department. Therefore, the cost of developing such a game would be much bigger than in the case of the previous two prequels. And it's not always the case that the more money you spend on something, the more you earn from it. Sometimes you buy a lottery ticket for $2 and win 20 grand, and other times you buy an antique for 20,000 and after a few years you throw it away because it turns out that nobody wants to buy it. In the case of SA Stories, especially with GTA 4 emerging on the horizon, it could be the same. And there's one more argument that probably affirmed the developers that there's no need for SA Stories. Well, the 20-minute film called The Introduction plays the role of a mini prequel, which does a good job at explaining the main threads that we deal with in the game. Well, alright, it's not the strongest of arguments, but looking at the previous 5, that one could just additionally affirm the developers that it's better to go for innovation rather than recreating something that already existed. The thing that I found especially interesting in this subject is whether this game was ever even planned at all. Were there any leaks or rumors concerning SA Stories? And overall, what we can say is that, sure, the players were speculating a bit after the release of GTA Vice City Stories, but I haven't managed to find any official information or leaks. It seems like Rockstar very quickly made up their minds about that and assumed that the production of GTA San Andreas Stories would be a next to impossible challenge. I think that the thing that strongly suggests it is the aforementioned The Introduction film, which plays the role of a multi-threaded prequel for San Andreas, because after all, no such thing was ever released for GTA 3 or GTA Vice City. Perhaps the developers noticed that San Andreas is a very extensive game, and that as much the prequels for GTA 3 and Vice City seem realistic, San Andreas could pose a bigger problem. Hence, they figured that to not leave the players with 100 unclarified threads, the least they can do is make a 20-minute film in which they would portray the genesis of the main motives of the game. So unfortunately, it seems as if GTA San Andreas Stories was never even planned whatsoever. In terms of the player's speculation, it was obviously present. However, due to a complete lack of any official information or any believable rumors and leaks, they were just pure imagination, not supported by any facts. The ideas that the community was having were things such as the story of Tenpenny as a gangster, background of the information of the Loco Syndicate, or the story of Caesar and such. The most interesting thing is the would-be leak of the box cover art of GTA SA Stories that appeared on one of the websites in 2009. However, already at first glance, it's clear that the author of this work of art created it in GIMP in a maximum of 30 minutes, using the artworks from the original San Andreas. And the last thing that we'll touch on today is the fan-made modification called San Andreas Stories that plays the role of a prequel to GTA SA. And overall, it looks really promising. The missions are engaging and interesting. We got some new side activities, the world itself has been changed a bit, and the graphics were improved to resemble more the style of the Rockstar-made Stories games. Personally, I'm very excited about this mod because it's very atmospheric, which is something that I rate in games the most. In fact, there's only one thing that I'm not a huge fan of, and that is the story. I mean, the concept is seriously great because it portrays the story of Jose. In case someone doesn't remember who that is, it's that smartass that wanted to beat the crap out of CJ in the missions with lowriders. The mod shows us the moment when Jose only arrives in Los Santos and starts his journey in the criminal underworld. The story mostly revolves around Caesar's gang, which is really cool, but the thing that is ruining the overall vibe a bit is the AI voices. The dialogues are in a big part completely unnatural, because I guess that was to be expected. AI is a powerful tool, but also not perfect. Another thing is that sometimes the subtitles differ from what is being said by the characters, but I reckon that aspect has a big chance of being fixed in the future. But other than that, the overall vibe and the characters are great. Of course, we can encounter some familiar faces too, like Hazer or Sonny from GTA San Andreas. Additionally, the developers took care of a new set of radio news reports, similar to what was the case in the Rockstar-made prequels. For instance, in the game, we rob a store, the shop assistant gets killed, and then we hear about it on the radio. To sum it up, a great initiative. The mod looks very promising, and for many, it'll undoubtedly serve as a substitute for the missing Rockstar-made stories game. If you like watching videos about GTA, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and turn on the notifications. This way, you won't miss future videos. Thank you for watching. Meanwhile, I'm saying goodbye. Take care and see you soon.